Then I flash forward to 1980. I was working then as a secretary to a professor at the university, and his subject was social policy in the Scandinavian countries. He spoke Norwegian, Swedish and Danish and various Nordic languages. And he was putting up this poster after New Year 1980, and I recognised it and I said, "Oh, I've been there. That's Bergen Harbour." And John, my boss, said, "Oh, did you have a good holiday?" And I said, "No, I wasn't there on holiday. I was on my way to England, December 1939. He then asked me if I'd had any contact with the family, to which I said, "I have been trying for years, but unfortunately I've not been very successful. What have you got? Where have you got these addresses?" So I gave him two very, very precious letters that I'd found after my mother died in '63. One was saying that I was arriving and another one saying that I had arrived. Gave these to John, and 2 weeks later he called me into his office and he said, "Right, Mr. and Mrs. Alfson now live in Oslo. He's 75. She's going to be 70. It's up to you. What are you going to do?" So I hurried back into my office, sat down, and I wrote a letter. "Dear Mr. and Mrs. Alfson, are you the people who looked after a little girl in December 1939? If so, I'm that little girl." And I went on to tell them about my life, about my son getting married, having 2 daughters, and generally about myself. 1 week later, I got a letter back from Finn Alfson saying how wonderful it was to hear from me, that I'd been the topic of conversation for over 40 years, and when was I coming? Anyway, we continued having conversations and letters and things till the following year, when my husband said, "You should go. You should go. They're both in their 70s. If you don't connect, you'll regret it." So I phoned up and I said, "Would it be all right if I came for Easter?" Eileen, Mrs. Alfson, said, "No, don't come at Easter because we're still in winter. Come at Whitsuntide," which was May. With that, I proceeded to book my flight and off I went. And I'm sitting on the plane going to Oslo, and I'm thinking, what am I going to do for 4 days with these two old people who I've only met once when I was 4 years of age? What am I going to do with them? However, the plane landed in Oslo, picked up my luggage, got into the arrival lounge, and this lady who looked very similarly like Margaret Rutherford, typical English lady, grabbed me and said, "Liesel, you've not changed a bit." Well, I just thought, well, I must have been a really horrible looking kid, or I must have looked very old. Anyway, with that, she bundled me into a taxi and we sat and we chatted, and I said to her, "Where's Finn?" She said, "Oh, he's much too excited. He couldn't come." Anyway, we went through the suburbs of Oslo and arrived to a forest, really. Beautiful area of Oslo. And the taxi pulled up at this gorgeous house. And this very tall man came out, paid the taxi driver, shuttled us into the house and promptly burst into tears. He was so overwhelmed to see me. Well, I had the most marvellous 4 days with them. They wined me, they dined me, but obviously I had questions.